Hey guys, welcome to episode 6 of the Ministry Coach podcast. My name is Jeff Lascola. I'm here with my partner in crime, Kristen Lascola.
Your better half,
Yay!
as some might say.
We have a really spicy, touchy-feely episode planned for this one.
Buckle up.
Kind of thought we were going to approach this or attack this later in our podcast careers, but hey, why not? You know, it's the...
You can decide if you like us early on.
No, they already hate us. But this is a topic that needs to be addressed much more often. And I feel like is almost the revelation of topics where it's like, we're just going to skip around that. We're not going to talk about that book of the Bible because there's a lot to unpack, but this is a pretty...
And we're not even going to unpack all of it.
No.
We're going to start with some basic assumptions, tonight about this.
Do we want to address also the elephant in the room of theology, or are we going to leave that off the table?
I would say for now, let's leave it off the table.
Okay.
But I would like to get there someday. We'll see how palatable this episode is.
See how many trolls this brings out in the internet.
Ooh. And then we can go from there. If I have lost the will to speak publicly, then maybe we won't. But if I'm still brave, then maybe we will. I don't know.
All right. Well, why don't we get right into it? Go ahead. And I'm just going to take a back seat.
Cop out.
Yeah.
Typical.
Go ahead and start your...
Ready, set, go.
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. No, I mean, by the title of this podcast, you could see what we're talking about. And actually, it's not as spicy as you might think. We set it up, I think, kind of like, wait, you're a girl, but I think here's where we're going to start. Once you have a girl on your team, whether that... and I think the angle we're going to come from mostly tonight would be she's on your staff, paid staff. But this would also apply, to working with women as your volunteers. So here's who we're talking to. If you are a male youth pastor or pastor, same thing, right? Doesn't matter who you're a pastor to, you are a pastor. So you're a male pastor who has women working with him on a paid staff or in a volunteer capacity. So the reason we're setting it up like that is because we're already coming with the assumption that you believe women can lead in the church. Now, there's a lot of gray area within that, but we're starting from that basic assumption that you believe Scripture teaches that she can be on your staff. Now, here's where it gets weird, is a lot of pastors are at that point like, now what do I do?
Right.
And that's kind of what we want to address today. Once they're already on your staff, I think we have like 7 things we're going to address today of how to lead your female staff well, because it's a struggle. I was just talking to one of my friends today. He's a pastor in the Midwest, I guess. And he was saying, this is still a very real thing. And I know it is. I mean, we get trolls here and there and random things like that. But this is something that I think the church has made a lot of progress on, but I just don't think we're quite there yet. And I think after today's tips, maybe we could be one step closer.
Or several steps further. You be the judge.
How dare you? So here's what I see as progress. I think a lot of pastors are now at the point where they will hire women. I don't think that was always the case.
In a variety of different roles.
That move, I'm sorry if you're a children's worker listening to this, but that have moved beyond children's pastor, children's director, children's coordinator.
Yeah, and it's not
whatever.
A slight against them. It's just saying that used to be the ceiling.
Sure.
That you could, be a mother and be after these little kids.
Right.
And that's probably how they were seen.
And they're still legit pastors.
Right.
Children pastors are still pastors, but not everyone.
And God bless them for working with those
And that's
toddlers.
what I was going to say. And not everyone's cut out to be like, if that was my only ministry option, I wouldn't be in ministry because that's not my gift set, not even close. So I applaud those people, but it's like, man, there's not been any other opportunities for women in terms of pastoral leadership other than that for a very long time. And so now what the roles have become, I think, is something along the lines of girls director. So I'm speaking mostly from a youth ministry perspective on this. And so it'll be girls director, and as an equivalence, there'll be a guys director, so there's usually the youth pastor and then like at least 2 directors underneath him or her. That'll be like girls director, guys director, right? And so the thought is, boys minister to boys, girls minister to girls. And I think youth pastors have really found this to be a good hire for them, because how do I minister to my female students?
Right.
I don't know. Better hire a girls director. And that's fine, because they're usually in like, and there's some truth to that. It's like girls want to talk to girls, guys want to talk to guys. I get that. So that is not necessarily what I think we need to unpack, but more, okay, now what? What happens beyond that point? Because if you and I both work for the same pastor, the question is, what do our futures become? What is your future most likely, and what is my future most likely? Being equal footing, same position, just you're over guys, I'm over girls. Now what? I think the reason they're going different directions is, and maybe I'm going to step on a few toes here, so just hang out for a bit. You might like the end, but I think male youth pastors, beyond hiring, don't know what to do with their female staff. And I think that shows in the future forecast. So like not every male director becomes a pastor or becomes a ministry lead, but if a position is open and it's between me and you, chances are it's going to be you.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is whoever our boss is, I don't think he knows what to do with me. And I think he doesn't know where to take the working relationship, but it comes very naturally to him to take you next level. And it's a very big blind spot, because I think ministry leads think they're doing it.
Right.
And I also think they think just by hiring women, they're progressive. And
Check
they're
that box.
Exactly.
Good to go.
Right. And what my observation of the numbers are is like something's wrong, because why are there not more female youth pastors? I think it's coming down to, relationship. And I think a lot of male youth pastors either don't know what to do, they flat out refuse to do what they should do, or they list some reasons why they can't or maybe shouldn't, based on, what some boundaries are in their church. But here's the thing, as leaders, if you're just going to hire someone and call it good, you're not a leader. You're a manager.
Yeah.
You just made a hire. Great. That's not what we're doing here, because as leaders, what our job is to take the people underneath us as far as they want to go, as far as they can go, and as far as our leadership allows them to go. But if you just say, well, you're hired, okay, and then you kick back and, just let the chips fall where they may, you're a manager, you're a bad manager, but I think that's a cop-out excuse. Well, I hired her. It's like, sorry. They say I hired her. I'm not going to let the tension show through.
We're not going to give them Muppet voices.
It's adorable.
Yeah.
It was a compliment. So,
but yeah, a true leader should be raising up other leaders.
Sure.
Because unless you're afraid that by raising up another leader, it's going to take over your leadership position, which, that should never be a fear that you have. If you're a good leader, you should be raising up other leaders, duplicating yourself.
Yes.
And yeah, so if they're on your staff,
and that's the thing. And if they're good enough to be on your staff, if you saw something that's like, you're good enough to be on my staff, then that means you're good enough for me to take you next level. Otherwise, you're using people. Because then you're just, oh, you're doing a job I can't do. Yay, I hired you. Okay, I'm progressive. I'm there's equality in my ministry. Both genders are represented. No. If that's it, and if it's like, if she's good enough to be on your staff in the first place, then she's good enough for you to take her next level through a leadership and mentorship relationship, or else don't hire her in the first place, because now you're a user. You know what I mean? And here's, I think we can all be challenged in this one aspect, is to think back to the people in your own ministry or your own life who opened doors for you, who mentored you, who saw gifts at you, who saved a seat at the leadership table for you, that introduced you to the right people, that brought you to the right event, that helped you network. Because every single one of us, we are not self-made. We all have mentors to thank. We're standing on the shoulders of someone who saw something in us and poured into us. And so now what we do is we continue that pattern of ministry.
Paying it forward.
Exactly. Instead
leadership.
of using people to fill a role you can't or won't do because you're a manager. You know what I mean? So
now, obviously this goes probably without saying, but these would be females on your staff that haven't said, well, this is where I want to be and I don't want to go any further. Obviously that would be, you're not going to force them. No. Well, I mean, I guess you could.
No.
But.
And all I'm saying is that process of mentorship just doesn't happen as much with females. Now, you're not going to write their divine destiny of where they're going to land and where they're going to end up. But we all know the truth, and that relationship shapes skills, relationship shapes trajectory and opportunity. And guys, the facts are just the facts. Guys get that from guys all the time. And the girls get put on a shelf and you say, go do girls ministry, and you encourage them. You say you're doing a great job, but you don't give them yourself. We know that we're all formed in the context of relationship. That's the ministry model. That's why we have small groups. That's why that's what we do with students. And somehow we have this cop-out attitude of like, it's inappropriate. I must be above reproach. And you don't even know why you're saying it anymore.
It just sounds good.
It just sounds holy and pious and full of integrity. But let me just say this. If you refuse to meet with a woman on your staff, you are not doing your job. You are a manager, not a leader, and you're a bad steward of your leadership position. Ouch. I know that came across harsh, but I seriously mean every word of that. And I don't mean that to offend. I mean it to enlighten and challenge, because this is real and we need to like move on here. We need to get over this. And if we're still talking about like, well, you know, you can't meet one-on-one with a woman because she's going to fall in love with you. And then it's like, if that's where we're still at in this conversation, we need to move on.
Or the opposite, I can't meet with a woman because I might fall for her. Then it's like, you got some issues you need to work out.
It's called work. Like at the end of the day, like, yes, this is ministry and there's a whole like spiritual aspect to it, but this is our job.
Right.
You don't get to just say, ooh, like, I mean, I imagine any other job.
Right. And I was going to bring that up, which is, there's obviously some similarities and obviously some differences, but this would not fly anywhere else in the workforce. And it'll be, well, I can't meet with her because...
Well, and it's fear-based because we've watched the high and mighty fall, and it happens. It really does, but it happens everywhere and all the time. The solution is not to shut out half of God's people because you're afraid of them. Because we're going to get into it a little bit, because Jesus was not at all.
Right.
You know, like people stumble every day. People make bad decisions every single day, but we can't use that as an excuse for shutting out and snuffing out leadership potential in people. Like, we got to figure this out. We're creative people. We can do this. I know we can. So
what is number one?
Number one. All right.
Former cheerleader over here.
Number one. Yeah. Okay, I was. And still a coach. If you know of anyone in the San Diego area, call me.
Ministry Cheerleading Coach Podcast.com.
It's very memorable. Okay, so number one, we've talked about this. Admit that hiring is not enough. It is better not to hire her in the first place than to hire and neglect. Don't pat yourself on the back for hiring a female that you have no intention of doing any development with.
But it looks good in the team photo.
Diversity. Yeah. Well, again, then it becomes this self-serving, selfish hire. If you have no intention, because the reason those guys are moving on sometimes to the next level, not every guy you hire is the next youth pastor, but some of them are, and way more likely than she is. Is he more called? No. Is he more anointed? No. Is he more talented? No way. He just got more of you. That's all. That's what that's what I wish people understood. Is I've heard youth pastors say before, well, if I met a talented enough girl, I would have no problem hiring her. But what they don't understand is, but you're the qualifier.
Right.
You're looking for these qualities in her that you will give her. You're the one that's going to give her the qualification, just like someone gave you the qualification. Remember your first sermon? Oh my gosh. Painful. Stupid. Remember your first event? Remember? How old am I? Remember your first event?
Not supposed to talk like that.
Just remember how green you were at one point, and the patience someone had with you to sit down and really just mine these things out of you, and then think, that's what I owe these people. So number one, admit that hiring is not enough. Number two, admit that leadership potential and trajectory is a mix of gifts, callings, and mentorship and opportunities by superiors, and admit that you are the one that hold the keys. Admit that you hold the keys for those that work in your ministry. You are a key holder to their opportunities, and what doors are you unlocking, and for who? Is it whom or who?
You're asking the wrong person.
And for
I don't remember that.
I'll say both.
I don't know.
So anyways.
And I think if you do know, you're lame.
Annoying.
No one wants to talk to you anyways.
You're bitter at some people, just like
the wordsmiths out there.
Yeah, I think there has to be this admission that we hold the keys a lot of times to the people who work with us, their success. And that has to be a realization. And you have to do some real self-search of, what have I done for them to open doors? What have I done to polish them? What have I done to introduce them to the right people? Am I a stage hog? Am I an opportunity? I mean, I think every bad leader thinks that their staff works for them, and every good leader knows you work for your staff. And I think that, again, pastors can be really good at that with their male staff. I mean, it just has to be both. It does. You need to figure that out. Number 3, stop letting unfounded and unhealthy fears dictate how you disciple those God has called to serve alongside you. Do your job. So don't be the one to cap someone else's leadership, because I think what we're really dealing with is a lot of fear. And I think it's under the guise of this phrase, above reproach, but I think it's fear. And I think it's fear of like not knowing how to do it, because it's never been modeled to you. It's always just been shunned. And so I do have compassion on youth pastors that don't want to do it because they don't know how. And I think that's real to say, like, I don't know what to do. You know what I mean? But I promise you there is a way to do it that's full of integrity and that is God honoring. Like, not every mixed gender relationship is some explosion waiting to happen.
Right.
Like, my goodness. But I would love to move on from this conversation. And I've seen pastors and youth pastors actually do it very, very well too.
And when it's done well, it's not awkward.
It's
not weird.
Nope.
It's very natural. And then they're good at it. They're gifted at it, probably because they worked at it.
Right.
Maybe they were just born with that natural gift, but it's one of those skills, if you want to call it that probably needs to be worked at. And if you're not good at it, you probably need to get better at it by, I don't know if that means wise counsel or practice or
what. And I think identifying, what are you afraid of? You know what I mean? Like, are you just so afraid of stumbling? Okay, dive into that. Do some self-search and figure out where that's coming from. Are you afraid you're going to be seen and someone's going to think something weird?
Right.
Okay, there's ways to communicate. There's ways to have healthy public meetings and all that kind of stuff.
And there's gonna there's going to be a difference, and maybe we'll get to this later in some of the points, but you're not meeting one-on-one for a late night dinner at a fancy restaurant overlooking the ocean. You in some of those things that you might be able to, not that you do that with a guy either, but you might think,
yeah, when's the last time you took me on a late night?
We have kids. We got about 18 years before that's going to happen again. But if you were, if you have a male director hanging out, playing video games all night, no one would think you would not probably be able to do that with a female.
No, and to be honest, I don't even want the content of this episode to go to the specifics of what you can do and what you can't, because
it's kind of a no-brainer, I think.
And that's what. Oops, sorry, hit the mic. And
take it easy. Take it easy.
And that's what I was gonna say. Is like a lot of this is just good old-fashioned common sense. Yeah. And if you are in the position you're in, which is you are the buck stops here ministry lead, I would sure hope you have enough common sense to know what is appropriate and inappropriate when it comes to intergender relationships. Like, my goodness. And if we're still talking through the details of, well, you can meet during the day and you can't text after 7 p.m. It's like, oof, we've got a lot of work to do, my friends. If that's where this conversation still is in the last 20 years, like, move it on. Right. Like, we have some jobs to do. Let's just do them.
I think those are the fears, though, that people will default to in their head. But as we're talking about this, I'm sure a lot of people think, well, you can't do this or that.
Talk to your church, talk to your wife, talk to whoever, figure out what is appropriate for you and do it. But do not do your job. You figure out how to do it, right? Number 5, understand what above reproach.
Did we do a number 4?
Yeah.
Am I getting lost? Okay.
Oh, we didn't, but I didn't number these correctly.
That does not surprise me.
Sorry.
And here I am.
5, 6, 7.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
5, 6, 7, 8. Number 4.
Number 4. I think we kind of already talked about this, but I'll just state it concisely. Understand what above reproach actually means and stop making yourself feel falsely integrous. That is a word. Because of man-made, fear-based, illogical boundaries. So I think we've already discussed that. Yeah. Number 5, this one's my favorite. Seriously. Take a lesson from Jesus. All right. So there's a lot of examples of Jesus doing one-on-one ministry with women. Kind of, I would argue, going out of his way to be alone with them in order to disciple them, to challenge them, to call them out on their crap, to have relationship with them. I think of the woman at the well. She was completely alone. He's a man, she's a woman. And then there's the whole cross-cultural complication there as well. And she was quite a
not one
woman.
You'd want to be one-on-one.
Oh yeah, she didn't like work at the church,
right.
So and he went out of his way to really love her and disciple her and move her from where she was to where she needed to be. He asked her very good, pointed, personal questions. He was in the position of pastor, mentor. He was discipling her through relationship. He found her and challenged her. I love that story for that reason. I think of his relationship with Mary and Martha, those two sisters. Like, he was hanging out at their house. He was good family friends. There's that whole scene of they're sitting at his feet, like listening to him teach. Like, they were hanging out, and he took it upon himself to disciple them. My absolute favorite one, though, is in the garden after Jesus had I'm going to cry. I just love this story so much. Where he resurrected and the disciples and the women all run and, they're looking for Jesus. Well, the guys leave and Mary sees him, and that's when he decides to reveal himself, when she is there alone and the guys had left. And the line that gives me chills is when she's talking to him and she's like, "Are you the gardener? Where'd you put his body?" And he says, "Mary." And the moment he just says her name, she totally recognizes him. And she was the first one to preach the risen Christ. But he could have appeared to all of them, but it was this so special moment of him and her. Oh, I can't even handle it. Alone. And it just kills me every time I read that. Anyways, we better move on because I'm going to lose it.
Why didn't he CC her husband? Oh, wait, she wasn't married. So why didn't he pull out another male?
What time of day was it?
Hold on, Mary. Oops, I said your name. Hold on. Let me get somebody else over here so we can...
Well, maybe he should have said, like, I'm going to be meeting with Mary. I don't want anyone to think anything weird. So, and then, but they probably left that part out of the gospel.
It was in a public place. There were a lot of other people. Wait, no, there weren't.
So here's, I guess, the bottom line is how to mentor males. So how to mentor females. And taking a note from Jesus himself, I just don't know how you can miss that. He had women disciples. He had women who were financing his ministry. He had women who were partners in his ministry. We just saw he had mentorship relationships with a lot of women. Like, he was not scared. So this whole fear-based thing of like, I can't meet with them. I think when you look at how Jesus treated women in the gospel, I don't see fear at all. I don't see anything inappropriate, but I don't see weird boundaries that exclude women from going next level. I just don't see it. And so I think what the Bible does is it definitely records a culture that's very male-centric and patriarchal, but I don't think that is prescriptive. I think it's simply descriptive of the times and of the culture, because you can't miss what Jesus does with women and even the positions of leadership he puts them in. I have a woman crush on Deborah, from the book of Judges, because she was a spiritual leader over the entire nation of Israel. She was a military leader over the entire nation of Israel. And when people say, oh, it's because there was no males available at the time, where did you pull that out? Like, I've read that story backwards, forwards, and upside down, and I can't even see a glimmer of such a notion as that. The Bible makes no excuses or explanations for her. It was just, she was in charge of Israel at the time. And she was the only judge that was also a prophet, which means she was the spiritual leader. I mean, she is a boss.
That is a hardcore children's director, if I ever heard of one. Right?
Right. So here's my last point. Number 7. I rework. Okay, 7. Yes, that's correct. And this is going to sound a little harsh, I think, but I mean it.
I'm laughing at you. You picked an eye booger out while you were saying
It was an itch. It wasn't an eye booger. I have an itch. Is that okay? I'm human. Welcome to my human.
For those of you listening on the podcast, you didn't get to see the eye booger pick. Check out our YouTube channel.
Try to focus on what's important here. Okay? I'm on a roll. So here's the last point.
Number 7.
If you cannot do 1 through 6, don't hire females. Just don't do it. If you can't do it, here's what you need to do. You need to tell God, hey, if you have a gifted woman who you'd like to send to me, I'm going to have to ask you to send her to a different church because I just cannot honor her leadership gifts under my leadership. I don't have the capacity for it. And I think that sounds like super jerky to say, but I mean, I think we cannot hire and do any more shoddy jobs at this because I think the church is suffering for it. I think girls in your youth group are suffering because of it. They need to see women in leadership, loving the Lord, preaching the word of God, and they need to see, and both, I mean, both, they need to see guys and girls, but they need to see both represented in leadership in your youth group. And if you can't do it well, it's better just to not do it at all, because students can feel it. They can feel like who's really in charge. And that's the hard thing about partnerships in ministry, is because it's like, yeah, we're like a team, like A and B, or is it A1 and A2? And it gets weird.
Your assistant to the regional manager.
Complicated. Yeah. And people pick up on that because, and again.
Well, how many times when I used to volunteer in your ministry, when parents would come up, they would default to saying, "Oh, you must be the pastor."
Oh, your kid has a bloody nose. Yeah, that's who you want to talk to.
Yeah, they always come right to me. I was like, I'm not in charge of this sinking ship. You got to talk to her.
Rude. We're thriving, my
But
friend.
It was interesting though how that would happen.
Totally, and
all the time, and it would never in this day and age, never in a million years in this day and age, whatever, would it been if it was reversed and I was the pastor and you were my volunteer. No one would have come up to you.
No way.
Unless it was a children's ministry, but no one would have come up to you and said, "You must be the pastor." Oh, right. No, it's him.
And this might be I think you're taking a detour here because I could go.
Detours. I haven't really been paying attention to what we're talking about.
Of course not. But like, I think we could talk a lot about just even how women in ministry just makes some people uncomfortable in general. You know, like for a really long time I didn't call myself a pastor because I could tell, like, I would get these vibes of like,
well, what kind of weird snake twirling church are you a part of?
Snake twirling. I love that mental picture.
It's a sect. It's a denomination.
No, they're snake handlers, not snake twirling.
The twirlers are the ones that you really got to watch out for.
But it's like, are you twirling it like a baton, or are you holding it up and you're twirling?
Dealer's choice. I've never been to their services, but I'd love to find out.
If you're a snake twirler, comment below and tell us.
Reverse here for a second. There was another point I wanted to make. Now I've forgotten what it was. It probably didn't matter.
It's probably dumb.
Most of them are. Oh, I got it. You were mentioning people need to see women in leadership roles in that capacity, and a lot of male youth pastors, and probably even some female youth pastors at this point would say, yeah, but there's just not a lot that are interested or that are pursuing that job. And you kind of touched on that before, where if you're not raising them up, why would they be doing that?
Well, and it goes to that now becoming cliche that you can't be what you can't see. Like, as a young girl, I never in a million years would have thought like a youth pastor was even a potential job for me. I mean, I wasn't interested in ministry regardless, but it wouldn't even have crossed my mind. But a lot of the leaders I've raised up, I pursued them too. Like some have come to me and said,
you saw the gifts that they had.
Right. You know, we just talked to Gordy, and, you know, he was one that I said like, hey, like, Gordy, you have some gifts. Let's run with this a little bit and see where we go. But I don't think that always happens for the females, you know, and if it does, it's to fill a role because you can't do it. And then you put her on the shelf. You know, we have run circles around that for a while.
It's just that vicious cycle though. If you're not raising them up, they're not in positions of leadership. They're never seen in positions of leadership. Positions of leadership, and so therefore people don't see that, don't realize it's a possibility, don't pursue it.
Well, and also not just leadership, but high level leadership. You know what I mean? Because I see a lot of male youth pastors, they'll hire a girl and then she'll work for him for like a couple years, and then she's hit her ceiling, and it's like, no one's promoting me, no one's opening doors for me, so she goes and becomes a teacher. You know, which is great if that's what she's meant to do, but not all of them are. And I've sat down with enough female youth pastors to know they're frustrated, and they say, so what am I doing? Like, is there anywhere for me? What should I be doing? And they have
it's contagious, right?
They have felt shelved. You know, it's like, I did what you asked me. I did this job, but you are not pursuing my future with me. Pursue her future with her. That's such a good line. I love that. Pursue her future with her, you know, and that's when they get discouraged and are like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to go
elsewhere.
Work here, work there, and I put in my time in ministry, where some of those guys, they can feel it coming and they wait and they hang on and they apply here, and they can feel the momentum rising based on the opportunities they're getting and the platforms they're being a part of. Like, you've got to platform her. You've got to introduce her to the big guns. You've got to name drop her all the time when you're in front of people that hold keys.
But again, not going that because she's a girl, but just because you see the gifts that you would
if
see
she's
in your,
awesome,
in your
like,
male
don't
leaders.
patronize.
Right.
Don't you go, girl. Like, we're gonna like.
Who was saying that?
Stop. So don't do it superficially, or you know what I mean. But like, I refuse to believe she doesn't have talent. It just needs to be mined, And so, anyways, I could talk about this all day, but I think we covered it. Maybe another time we'll do something theological if you are a listener who still has a hang up. Because I'm passionate about talking about women and the theological basis for them being in leadership positions anyways. And I could talk all day about that too. I love it, but I think this is enough offensive language for today.
It's not offensive. It's necessary.
Ooh, thanks. Thanks for having my back.
You're welcome. Yay.
You're such a good pastor's wife. I mean, husband.
Yeah, that's a whole other episode. Thank you. You're so weird. So, yeah,
I work with junior hires, Jeff.
yeah.
I mean, what do you expect?
That's true.
I am weird.
You're becoming a junior hire. Well, I think we've covered that pretty well. Can you go through and recap just the top 7 or the 7 points that you were highlighting?
All right. Rapid fire. Number 1, admit that hiring is not enough. Number 2, admit that leadership potential and trajectory is a mix of gifts, callings, and mentorship, and you hold the keys. Number 3, stop letting unfounded and unhealthy fears dictate how you disciple those God has called to serve with you. Number 4, understand what above reproach actually means. Number 5, take a lesson from Jesus. Number 6, realize that withholding your intentional leadership and mentorship from those that serve with you is bad stewardship of your leadership. That's a lot of words. Number 7, if you can't do these things, don't hire females.
Yeah.
Ask God to send them somewhere else.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.
Thanks for checking out this episode. We hope that it provided a ton of insight for you to create health in yourself, your ministry, and your church.
And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the Ministry Coach podcast wherever you're watching or listening. And it would mean so much to us if you would rate and review this show on Apple Podcasts.
And we'd also encourage you to share it with a friend so that it can go to help more people. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.